Really know God or don't really understand his system. So we're serving something that we think is God, but it's not really God. We're either serving a poverty God or a lottery God, right? Poverty God says, you know, I'm not supposed to be successful. I'm not supposed to have wealth. I'm supposed to be lowly and meek, and I'm just not supposed to accomplish anything in life. That's a poverty God. Lottery God says all I have to do is pray, right? Because I'm going to treat prayer like it's a craps when I'm gambling, right? I'm just going to pray, sit back, and let God handle the rest. That's a lottery God. I'm just going to put it on, I'm going to put, you know, snake eyes, and I'm going to put it on black, and I'm going to put it on, whatever we do, whatever games we play, we treat God like it's a lottery. And so what happens is, when things don't work out in our lives, what do? We blame our God. Isn't it interesting? In the Garden of Eden, God approaches Adam and Eve. He says, Adam, what happened? Adam blamed God. Eve, what happened? Eve blamed the devil. And as Christians, that's exactly what we do. We make God and the devil the scapegoat for all of our foolishness because we're hiding behind these powerful forces. And so what has happened is spiritual laziness has crept into our lives because we've made everyone else responsible for our own life rather than realizing that when God created us, he gave us everything that we need in order to accomplish things in the earth. Is that right? That's right. So as it relates to patterns, I want to share with you something that's really, really, really deep. Because when God creates something, it is said that order is the first law of heaven. That whenever God creates something, he creates them in patterns, in certain sequences. And you can begin to study aspects of God's creation, which gives you a better understanding of God. So some would say, you know, some would ask me, you know, if I wasn't a speaker or if I didn't really deal with relationships, what is it that I would want to be? And I would always say, I would love to be a scientist because I love studying how creation came about. Because when you study science, you're understanding better who God is. And even though scientists for so long have been atheists and tried to disprove God, the more you begin to study, the more you begin to prove the existence of God. Does that make sense? All right. So as it relates to that, when God creates, a lot of times he creates in patterns. He creates in cycles. He creates in spirals. And there are 3 spirals that we can quickly identify. And I want to share these with you. Number 1, there's a type of spiral that you see that starts out as a small circle, works its way around, and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Has anyone ever seen that spiral before? Yes. So if you can see this, pretty much the width between each layer is equal to the other, and it grows slowly over the course of time. That represents natural progression. That represents natural progression. So as you grow, everything around you grows simultaneously. So you don't necessarily notice the growth that you're going through because it's natural progression. In the earth we have 4 seasons: winter, summer, spring, and fall. They each last for a number of months. We have years. We go from one year to the next year. When you turn 35, you may not look or feel any different than 36, but you're older. But you're growing. Your progression is natural. That's one type of a cycle. It's called a progressive growth. Progressive growth. Then you have another type of cycle or spiral that starts on the outside, big, and works itself in. Have you ever seen that? Talk to me somebody. Yeah. That is called an inverted spiral. That represents regression. That represents slow death. That represents things going backwards. That represents ultimately things going out of control. Have you ever heard the term, my life is just spinning out of control?
Yes.
Have we experienced that in our lives?
Yes.
So from a marital perspective, we'd rather have progression than regression, right?
Right.
But there's a third spiral. And this is the spiral that many of us want to begin to operate in because it will allow us to experience significant change and transformation in our marriages. Now, there's something called the Fibonacci sequence. Okay? Anybody ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay, the Fibonacci sequence was a man by the name of Leonardo Fibonacci, who in the 1500s, he was a mathematician. He was a scientist, and he studied numbers and mathematical equations. And there's this term called sacred geometry that some of you may have heard of. And he would study the patterns in the universe and things of that nature. And so as it relates to growth and progression, he's identified this pattern or cluster of numbers or sequences that appears in all of life's existence. So this Fibonacci sequence can be found in, let's say, a sunflower. It can be found in a snail. It can be found in the bronchial tubes of your body. It can be found in your heart. It can be found in the shape of your ear. It can be found in the waves of a tide as the waves come in from the ocean. It can be found in the galaxy of the universe. It's found everywhere you go. And because of this particular pattern that can be found everywhere, it has been termed the fingerprint of God, representing his creation. Now, Fibonacci sequence operates like this. Starts out small, gets bigger, and bigger, and bigger. Have you ever seen a spiral like that?
Looks like a snail.
Looks like a snail. Perfect example. Looks like a snail. That's the Fibonacci sequence. Now, in terms of a numerical code, this is how the formula is calculated. Do you see that? Okay, so what does this mean? This particular spiral represents what we call exponential growth, where you take leaps forward. So from a mathematical equation, the way that this is calculated is, the first number is actually 0, but the first one in terms of this is 1. Okay? So 1 plus 1 is 2. Correct? Okay. So I'm at 2. In order for me to get to 3, in order for me to move forward, I've got to step back and add the number that came before it, and allows me to get to 3. I'm at 3. In order for me to get to 5, I've got to step back, add the number that came before it to get to 5. Are you following me?
Yes.
To get to 8, I've got to go back. It gets me to 8. Now I'm at 8. I've got to go back, and I leap forward into 13. To get to the next digit, I've got to go back, I leap forward, and so with every leap, it's a larger leap. But it requires that I go back to leap forward. Have you ever heard the expression, sometimes you got to take 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward? Well, what does that mean? As relates to your marriage, stepping back means stepping back and reflecting, going back into reflection, and properly evaluating what has taken place in your marriage, right? And adding new knowledge and new skill to your present life so that you can leap forward into your marriage. So if you have problems in the area of your communication, sometimes it's good to step outside of yourself, to step back and reflect on all the problems and situations that are going on, figure out what new skill, what new knowledge you can add to yourself, begin to work it so you can leap forward. This can apply to communication. This can apply to sexuality. This can apply to finances. This can apply to every area of your personal life, your marital life, your occupational life, your educational life. This is called the law of promotion. You can, in essence, be promoted in your marriage. How many of you would love to be promoted on your job? So let's be practical for a second. What would be a good strategy to be promoted on your job?
high performance. I mean, going above and beyond. Maybe Call of Duty. I mean.
Okay.
Didn't know the person who was doing the hiring.
Okay.
Get into it.
Okay, get into it with the person who's, okay. What else?
Extra training, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Extra training.
Extra training.
Good stewardship.
Good stewardship.
Creativity.
Creativity. Any one more? Huh?
Attendance and punctuality.
Attendance and punctuality. Okay.
You gotta be there.
Okay, gotta be there, that's true. So, law of promotion on your job. I heard everything was correct, but in the context of which we're speaking, I heard get more training, good stewardship, somebody I think mentioned education or something like that, in your current position. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, if you're faithful over the few, over the little things, I'll make you ruler over what?
Many.
Over many, over much. So in order for you to elevate to another level, it's not just having the desire to do it. It's not just leaping forward and jumping into that position, because if you're not prepared for the position that you're going into, you won't be able to sustain yourself. So in essence, in order to move into a higher place, you have to become someone different in order to be able to function at that level. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So a lot of you may be, some of you may be in miserable marriages and you just want a better situation, or you just want to move on to another relationship because you think that if I just move on to something else, it'll just be different. But you're bringing your same broken self into that new relationship. Or you want something more within your existing relationship, but you bring your same hurt, broken self, trying to get to another level, but can't maintain it. So the key is stepping back, reflecting, adding a new skill, adding some more knowledge, becoming faithful over the level that you are on. God has given you what? A spouse, He's given you children, He's given you whatever He's given you. And when you prove yourself to be faithful over those things, being the best wife that you can be in your current situation, the best husband that you could be in your current situation, and when you've proved yourself on